presentation, but at any point, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to throw them in the comment section and we'll answer as we go along. So again, welcome. We're really excited to have you in the Africa Climate Careers Network community. This is a flagship course that we've designed that's open to all the members of the community, and it's designed to help early career professionals like you learn about the climate sector in Africa. We offer skill building and sector exploration sessions to help you prepare for a career in climate. Our goal is to provide you with knowledge and tools that you need to transition into and build your careers in the sector, as well as navigate and contribute effectively to climate action in Africa. Whether you're looking to transition into a new career or expand into other areas within climate, we hope that we'll be able to help you do that. So let's dive in. I'll start with an introduction to the impact of climate change in Africa. And, Africa itself is facing unique challenges in this climate change conversation. This is both because of geographical and economic factors. From a geographical perspective, where we're located in the globe makes us especially susceptible to rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns. I'm sure you've noticed wherever you're from that our seasons are not as reliable as they used to be. And when they come through, they're quite extreme. And in terms of economic barriers, we also we experience limited capacity and increased climate vulnerability due to the nature of the developing economies that exist within Africa. And basically what this means is because we are developing countries in general, we don't have the resources that, let's say, the Western countries or the first world, which I hate to say, may have, that will give them a leg up in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So a question to those who've joined: I'd like to know what country you're from and what impact you believe climate change has had from your country. I'll give you a couple of minutes to drop some comments in the comment box. Welcome to those joining. I'm just inviting some comments in the comment section. Please let me know which country you're from and if you've noticed any impact climate change has had from your country. I'm from both Kenya and Seychelles, that's why I've added two observations. Thanks. Thanks, Donald, for your contribution. Anyone else want to share where they're from? Okay, I mean, feel free to let me know as we go on, but I'll keep us moving. Oh, I see. Solomon from Malawi. Cyclones from the Indian Ocean through Mozambique. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you for sharing, Solomon, and welcome to the session. Anyone else want to share? I see Adesowo from Nigeria. I hope I've said your name right. Fluctuating rain pattern within the year. Thank you for sharing. I suppose there's a bit of a consensus that this year has been very rainy, or the rains in particular have been affected. I'm sure equally you may have noticed that the hot weather is extremely hot when we have it, but we're trying to adapt. I'll move us along in terms of the climate trends. So, like we mentioned, Africa is especially susceptible to climate change, and it's a serious threat to the continent and our population. Um, we are warming faster than any other continent at a rate of 1.5 degrees since the pre-industrial era. And this is projected to increase by another 2 to 4 degrees by the end of this century that we're in. It feels like a very long time, but the incremental changes are actually very significant. We've noticed, as we've talked about in the comment section, that rain patterns are more erratic and extreme, and some regions are experiencing more frequent drought, more severe drought, and others more intense flooding. This, of course, makes it difficult for farmers to grow crops and for people to have access to clean water and fresh food. In terms of extreme weather events, Solomon mentioned, there's cyclones, there's heat waves and floods. These are becoming more common across the continent. And these events can cause widespread damage to the infrastructure and agriculture, as well as displacing millions of people. On the ground, the impact across the regions is slightly different, but also kind of the same. In the Sahel region, we're seeing desertification expanding and causing migration of the populations. In East Africa, we've noted that the drought frequency has doubled since the 70s, and of course, this has disrupted agriculture. In South Africa or Southern Africa, there's cyclone frequency and intensity are increasing. In West Africa, we're seeing rising sea levels that are threatening coastal communities. This isn't an exhaustive list of the impact we're seeing, but broadly covers generally what we're experiencing across the continent. Thank you, Evan from Kenya, for your comment there on the unpredictable weather patterns. Going back to the on-the-ground impact, we also see social and economic fallout. There's vulnerable communities that are hit the hardest, of course, maybe because of where they live, but also because of poverty levels. And this climate change exacerbates the existing poverty and inequality that we see in our populations. Especially with disruption in agriculture, where a lot of people make their informal living or income. When that's disrupted, the ripple effect is quite significant. In terms of global injustice, from an economic fallout perspective, Africa is the least contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, but we are receiving or experiencing a disproportionate amount of impact as a result. And so we start talking about climate adaptation and mitigation strategies. Why are they both important? And why do we need a dual approach? One, our unique vulnerabilities as a continent makes that both adaptation and mitigation is essential. Adaptation helps communities cope with the current impact, and mitigation helps us reduce further impact based on climate change. If we look at adaptation a bit closer, we start to see that we have to tailor the solutions to our local contexts. Some examples of what we can do to adapt to the changes. Water harvesting is one. We experience a lot of heavy rainfall, even though we are not quite sure when these seasons happen. So while that happens, we should be taking advantage and harvesting water. There's a rise in climate resilient crops designed by our scientists and our governments to withstand erratic weather. Adaptation of early warning systems, which alert communities around imminent extreme weather. I'd invite Solomon to let us know in the chat if they had any kind of alerts coming through on the cyclones that they experienced in Malawi. Those types of early warning systems are very useful to help people get out of danger areas as early as possible before things happen. For example, in Kenya, the northern region was flagged to be a potential flooding area, and it was indeed true. And so, for those who could, were preparing for the inevitable flooding that was happening. In terms of infrastructure, our government should be investing in structures that can withstand extreme events. And in terms of return on investment, every dollar that's directed to adaptation methods can generate up to $7 in benefits. This is a finding by the World Bank. Looking at mitigation and what Africa can do. Africa is leading in renewable energy. Our potential is so large compared to the rest of the world. We can potentially generate up to 10 terawatts, which surpasses the global energy consumption through renewable energy. In terms of carbon capture, our afforestation and reforestation initiatives will be super key in reducing carbon emissions or also driving carbon management. In terms of energy efficiency, buildings and industries being designed to reduce emissions is also a thing that we can lead in based on our cultural, there's a word I'm looking for, origins, I guess. You'll see in like coastal towns, the architecture naturally allows for natural cooling and things like that. So those are some of the things as a continent we can lead in terms of adaptation. Public transport, we've been investing as a continent in sustainable transportation systems. I'm sure you're aware of the boom in terms of e-mobility and the rising interest in that technology and the ripple effect in terms of charging stations and new types of technologies that are coming through based on that. And in terms of impact, Africa alone could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 30% in the next 3 decades. And so what do we need to be able to do that? We definitely need investment. The adaptation costs would be 30 to 50 billion per year from an Africa Development Bank perspective. And in terms of investing in renewable energy, we have to start harnessing our potential as a continent. Both these strategies, adaptation and mitigation, are really key to how we're able to lead and take charge of our own destinies in Africa, in the climate change narrative. But at the same time, we do need support from the rest of the globe in terms of investment, because as I mentioned earlier, while we're experiencing a lot of the effects, we're contributing the least. And so everybody in the world, or all the countries, need to do their part to enable the correct investments to be made to help Africa position itself to lead the change. So looking at actual climate change initiatives in Africa, we have the Africa Union's Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan for Africa. It's a big mouthful, but it's an important and comprehensive framework that's providing a way for African countries to address climate change. Some of the goals and actions that this plan covers includes what I've highlighted here: increasing use of renewable energy, improving on energy efficiency, reducing deforestation, reducing emissions, adapting to climate change, and promoting sustainable development. Later in this presentation, I have some case studies on actual interventions that have been taken to both adapt and mitigate. So we'll go through those. Another initiative in Africa for climate change is the Climate Technology Center and Network. This is a resource for the African countries that are seeking to deploy and transfer climate technology. And the range of services that are provided through this initiative include technical assistance training and networking. The goal is to facilitate the transfer of climate technology to Africa. For example, we see a lot of technology being developed in Europe, for example, around wind, solar, etc. And now this is coming to Africa as well, as much as we're innovating for ourselves too. And also, another goal of this initiative is to enhance our capacity to develop our own technology and deploy. Another cool initiative that we've noted against climate change is the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative. And this is, as it says, an effort to restore forests in Africa. It is a huge initiative that includes a range of partners, both government, private sector, and communities to restore degraded land. The goals here are to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land in the next decade, create 10 million jobs, and improve livelihoods. I'll go into detail here too, in terms of where we are at as a continent with this initiative. Another one we'd like to share is the Global Green Growth Institute's Africa program, another big mouthful. So this initiative supports green growth by providing support in policy development, capacity building, and implementation. And the goal here is to promote sustainable and inclusive economic growth, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and improve resilience to climate change. So a question back to the participants in this call. Are there any initiatives you're aware of, whether it's adaptation or mitigation in your country? Please share in the comments. I'll give us 2 minutes to do that. Thank you. A Kenyan example of mitigation strategies that we're trying at the moment is tree planting. So for the Kenyans on the call, I'm sure you remember the public holiday we had recently where we were challenged or tasked with planting as many trees as possible. And the government released an app that enabled people who participated in the tree planting to record how many trees and where they grew those trees. So that we could now track how many trees in total were planted and will continue to plant as a country, but also more importantly, to start tracking the impact of this tree planting initiative against the green goals that we have as Kenya. So welcoming others who may have any observations from their countries to share as well. Thanks. Thanks, Donald. Yes, in Kenya, we have the tree planting program and expansion of renewable energy systems, e.g. the geothermal power plant. That's absolutely true. And I think this is also true for DRC. They're investing in mini grids quite a bit. Sinaida has raised a hand. Please go ahead and share. Thank you. Solomon has shared there's a project to construct drainage canals in the lower Shire Valley in Malawi to drain. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. To drain the flooded water into the river. Thank you. Sinada, do you have something you'd like to share? You can unmute. If not, you can drop it in the comment box. Thank you. Okay. As we wait, I'll continue to take us through because I'd like to talk about key climate policies in Africa. So African countries are taking steps to develop and implement climate policies. And as much as this could be unique to the different countries in Africa, the different regions, they share some common goals, including reducing emissions, adapting to climate change, and also promoting sustainable development. Nationally determined contributions are the commitments that countries made under the Paris Agreement to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to climate change. And I've shared some examples here in terms of what Morocco, Ethiopia, and Kenya had committed to. Perhaps in my next call, I could share an update if I find it on where we are with these commitments. But also happy to say that each of these three countries do have an increased activity around renewable energy in general. When we look at renewable energy development as a policy, there's such potential in Africa across, solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and others. And so many countries are investing in this renewable energy to reduce their reliance on other fuel sources and to reduce emissions. Some notable projects that we can highlight are South Africa is building the largest concentrated solar power plant, but let me know if you know differently in terms of other countries that are achieving this. Egypt is building the world's largest wind farm, and Morocco has commissioned a huge solar power complex. When we look at agriculture policies related to climate, these are policies or rather, these are practices that will help farmers produce food and reduce emissions while adapting to the impacts of climate change. And Africa as a country already has really, I'd say, climate-friendly practice because of our traditions and how we have predominantly been growing food. But some examples of smart agriculture projects, climate smart agriculture projects rather, include Malawi promoting drought-resistant crops and improved irrigation techniques, Zambia promoting agroforestry practices, and Ethiopia promoting conservation agriculture practices. Solomon has shared that in Malawi, there are solar farms in each region. Thank you. And Sinaida has let us know that in Kenya, in the coastal regions in particular, we're regrowing and replanting our mangroves to restore ecosystems to what they used to be. And those are really powerful examples. Thank you for sharing. Jess is saying they're nicknamed Hewaka. Is that even how to pronounce it? Maybe you could share.
Yeah, so it was in response to Sinaida's comment. There was actually a post that we made on ACCN a couple of weeks ago highlighting the communities, the coastal communities along the coast who are planting and replanting mangrove trees as a bid to build carbon credits as well as a bit of reforestation. So they actually called it Hewaka, which is the Swahili word to describe carbon credits.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing. Jess and I are sitting together in case you guys are wondering why our voices are coming from the same, the same box. But a small tidbit that I learned about mangroves a long time ago is they also play a huge part in protecting the land mass from erosion from the ocean. And they do this by breaking the energy from the waves as they approach land. And so if, I don't know, I'll try and find that video where they show the difference between waves crashing on land mass without the mangroves versus with. It's a huge difference. And so it's so important to restore those mangroves, both from a cover perspective, but also to mitigate from future water erosion in those areas. Thank you so much for sharing that example. Coming back to our climate policies, we also have sustainable forest management, which is referred to as carbon sinks. And as we've mentioned, forests are really important in absorbing or playing a huge part in carbon management because they absorb a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And so it's a big priority for countries in Africa to protect and manage their forests to mitigate climate change. And some of the sustainable forest management projects in Africa include Gabon protecting its rainforests, Cameroon working to sustainably manage forests for timber production and other ecosystem services, and in DRC, they're reducing deforestation. So just to note, as much as Kenya recently had a huge tree planting drive, we also unfortunately unbanned logging, which had a huge impact on our existing forest systems. And I'm sure the rectification of that will have to be very intentional, which is why we have forums like this to create awareness on what we can do as people to make sure that never happens ever again. So in case you're ever in rooms where you can express your opinion or share some advice or recommendations, speak up against deforestation, logging, and things like that, and show your support for reforestation and recovering our cover. I just thought to share that because it's a contradiction in the Kenyan story. Another policy is early warning systems for extreme events. So like I mentioned, these systems save communities because they give them a heads up when there's extreme weather events coming. For example, when we know there's going to be drought, when we know there's going to be floods or other such weather events. And this helps the communities protect themselves and their livelihoods. So for example, for farming communities, there's things they can do to protect their crop from the effects of rainfall. In flood-prone areas, the communities can also prepare by creating drainage systems that can change the flow of these floodings and etc. So some other examples are the Regional Center for Training and Applied Climate and Agri-Meteorology. I managed this a lot better than last time, which is happening in Niger. And this is an early warning system for drought in the Sahel region. We also have the African Center for Meteorological Applications for Development in Mali, which developed an early warning systems for flooding on the continent. When we look at carbon pricing as a policy, it's a market-based approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I have to be transparent and say that it's also a controversial approach because, again, as we said at the beginning of the call, Africa is not responsible for a lot of the climate change issues that we see today, but we do experience a very large proportion of the impact. And so why do we talk about carbon pricing as a continent? Because we have the natural resources to reduce the emissions. And so we have to be part of the conversation around carbon pricing because making it more expensive to pollute, especially in the countries that drive pollution, encourages the businesses and the individuals in those countries to reduce their emissions. And so some examples of policies of carbon pricing in Africa include the implementation of carbon tax in South Africa and Rwanda, or rather Rwanda and Kenya are considering. And then in Kenya, we're also implementing a carbon trading system. If you've been in Kenya or are following general news, you'll learn that there is out of COP a company that is buying land, which is why I'm saying this is a controversial topic, to cover land that covers forest areas so that they can benefit from the carbon pricing arrangements that are being made between Africa and the rest of the world. And so my challenge as an organization, as people, as individuals that care about climate change is we need to have an opinion of how we feel about this, and where we can, we need to advocate for Africa solutions for Africa and the world, and not to sell our land. I mean, that's an easy way for things to be done, but I'm not sure it's the right way. But that's my personal opinion. So just for you guys, as you continue to learn about climate, develop your own opinions based on the knowledge and the facts that you have. And again, where you can, advocate. Moving on to climate change, education and awareness, ironically speaking about awareness, it's an essential, it's really essential for building public supported climate action. And so while we're developing and implementing climate change programs across Africa, in schools and communities, again, I'd like to say that as we continue to learn, let's also share within our own private communities, our own networks, so that as many people as possible have access to the same information that you have, so they can make informed decisions or advocate for themselves as well. Examples of climate change education initiatives in Africa include the ones listed below, driven by the African Union, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as the Global Environment Facility. However, I'd like to plug ACCN as a small education and awareness platform. The reason we want to create a lot of awareness around climate change is because from a professional perspective, there's a lot of opportunity for African youth to plug in with their talent, their skills, and their ambition to actually drive their careers in this sector and drive a lot of change on the continent. So forums such as this and others are also really important outside of the organized education initiatives by governments and NGOs across Africa. In terms of research and development policies or initiatives, you'll see that a lot of countries are now investing in research through institutions and programs, and some of these include the Africa Climate Policy Center, the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, and the Africa Academy of Sciences. And so each of these are developing and implementing climate policies, using knowledge to change policy making or to influence it, and also providing ways forwards in terms of climate change or sustainable development programs. And when we look at climate change finance as an initiative, I mentioned earlier that this is really important, both locally and also looking globally for support to help African countries adapt to the impacts of climate change on the continent and to mitigate emissions. And so a number of international donors, this is both private and government, are providing climate finance to African countries to help the continent meet its climate goals. And some initiatives include the Green Climate Fund, which provides support to developing countries to address climate change, and the Adaptation Fund, which also does the same, but for adaptation initiatives. And so we've talked a lot about what adaptation and mitigation is, what are some policies and initiatives that we can note, but now I'd like to talk about what the opportunity for Africa is with climate change. We have a green employment revolution on the horizon because we are uniquely positioned as a continent to capitalize on the transition to a green economy with the increasing attention on climate change in Africa. And so investing in these sectors creates millions of new jobs and can also promote a sustainable future for the continent. And these jobs will exist in a variety of sectors. They already do. And there'll be new emerging jobs coming through. And these include jobs in the renewable energy sector, climate smart agriculture, green tourism, sustainable forestry, and others. Some facts about the potential for green jobs. We estimate that Africa could create up to 28 million jobs in the renewable energy sector by 2050. This is really important for you guys to know. And these jobs are across a variety of functions, which I'll get into in a bit. Climate smart agriculture has the potential to create up to 70 million jobs by 2050. The tourism sector is expected to grow by 5% also in the next decade, creating millions of new jobs. The sustainable forestry sector is also estimated to have the potential to create 10 million jobs by 2030. And as global industries are changing how they function and reducing their emissions, Africa as a hub, because of our unique capability around renewable energy and resources, will definitely be a place to keep an eye on for employment opportunity. And so looking at where we stand in terms of this revolution, we've noted a lot of countries across the continent are investing now in the renewable energy sector, in climate smart practices, in carbon reduction and pricing, as we mentioned, as well as sustainable practices like restoring forests, investing in green architecture and developing green industries such as the green hydrogen industry, and huge solar plants, desalination plants, focusing on waste management and boosting ecotourism initiatives, all of which we are so positioned to do because we have a lot of natural resources. And so all we need to do is rally our investments, our people, and our talent around these resources to lead the change. Our advantages as a continent include, like we said, the vast renewable energy potential, but also we have a huge young and growing population. We have abundant natural resources. We are growing economically. There's a lot of countries that are seeing economic growth year on year. And there's a lot of interest from an international perspective in terms of the investment of the opportunity on the continent. And so as we transition to this green economy, we see that there will be a huge opportunity to create millions of new jobs. And we have a chance to lead the conversation when it comes to addressing the challenges of climate change. And so we need to invest and receive international investment, as I mentioned, and develop the skills and capacities of the youth that we see taking on these jobs to capitalize on the opportunity. And so a question back to you guys is, what skills do you think we need to start preparing to participate in the climate change sector? Please drop your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you. Thank you for those raising their hands. We could start with Sinaida and then go to Hot Crew. Feel free to unmute and just speak. Thank you. Hot Crew, you can go ahead as we wait for Sinaida. Thank you, Solomon. Disaster risk reduction as a skill? Yes. Donald says technical skills and soft skills, absolutely. Hot Crew says climate smart agriculture practices, absolutely. As we wait for others, GIS skills. Thank you, Sadiq. Yes, we will need those. Those are technical skills. I'll share some of what we are seeing as shortlist. And I'll give more details in terms of the skills. So moving to types of job roles available in climate. Like you've mentioned, we need technical skills, and these are for technical jobs, such as renewable energy engineers and technicians, um, energy efficiency experts, climate scientists and analysts, climate adaptation specialists, environmental educators, and policy analysts and advocates. This, of course, is not an exhaustive list, but it's a highlight of the types of jobs that we've started to see coming through as the climate sector continues to grow in Africa. Thank you, Sinaida, for your comment. Leadership and negotiation skills to present Africa better. Yes, absolutely. Right now, we seem as the victims, yet we have more to give. I agree 100%. We definitely need to build our ability to advocate for ourselves and to negotiate in a way that benefits the continent more than the rest of the globe, so that we can truly talk about climate change from an African perspective. Thank you for that comment. And so back to the types of jobs available. There are other types, including fields such as finance, law, business, admin, HR. And so I've added some roles here that we can see, some obvious to the climate space, but others a bit overlooked. I'd like to say, depending on where your skill sets lie, you can actually pivot into a climate career. You don't have to have a technical certification or anything like that to position yourself to work in the sector. And so when we look at the types of jobs versus the employers in the sector, we know that this sector is growing rapidly in Africa. There's a lot of investment and very real change that's happening now and will grow in the future. And so if you're interested in working in climate, which you must be because you joined our community, and thank you so much, we as Shortlist have two resources that can help you identify which employers are in the climate sector space, and also I'll get to it, but we're also sharing a job board that shows you what kind of jobs we're seeing coming in. And so our resources that can help you with this identification of employers or an understanding of the jobs include our climate job board, which is accessible through our hub, and the link is here on the presentation, but we can also share it in the chat, is an open job board that has, I think right now, about 150 companies in Africa that are working in climate. 159, thank you, Jess. And over 1,000 jobs, I think 1,200 right now. And these jobs vary in terms of function, in terms of seniority, and qualifications needed. What I would encourage you to do is go to the job board and just have a look at what opportunities are on there, what kind of skills or experiences are they asking for? Because as you start building your career or looking to transition your career into climate, knowing what they're looking for in advance can help you seek out those experiences as part of your preparation. In case there is an education requirement that you might have access to that you haven't yet done, that would be a good opportunity to understand what those look like. And in case you have opportunities to volunteer or intern or drive an initiative in your own community that can help you gather these experiences yourselves as a way of preparing your career, that's also a fantastic place to see what kind of experiences would be valued in a climate job. The other resource is we have clean energy programs that we run as Shortlist. What that means is we work with some funding organizations that have enabled us to facilitate the identification and recruitment of youth and women across Africa to work with employers in the clean energy space. And so how that works is Shortlist both engages the employers and the youth and women and kind of match them to these jobs. So how you can learn more about these programs is to follow these links that Jess is sharing on the chat, explore and join our talent pools so that when we have opportunities in either of these programs, we can reach out to you directly by virtue of you being in our database. So we can shortlist you if you're eligible for the roles, and you'd have a chance to interview if you're shortlisted. So those are two resources that we can offer for actionable things you can do for your career. And if you have any questions as you try to access these, please let us know so we can help you, either on the ACCN channel or you can DM us directly and we'll get back to you. When we look at skills building in jobs in climate, I mentioned that a lot of people believe they have to have a specialized degree or a certain number of years in experience to work in the sector, but that's not always the case. As the climate sector grows, there's new job opportunities that we see increasingly appearing in these organizations that we work with. And some of the skills that we see that are transferable to the climate sector include communication skills. Being able to communicate effectively is a transferable skill that can get you a job in any sector. Problem solving is always highly valued because a lot of the issues in climate change or the challenges that are experienced need people to be able to creatively think of solutions. And again, I'd like to say this is not only from a technical perspective, but let's say, for example, you're a communications officer or something, applying yourself in terms of creatively thinking of how to find content, how to share this content or create some kind of campaign that addresses a challenge you've seen in the organization that you work with that you can use to share solutions. That would be great. I've just seen a comment from Adesowo about being unsuccessful with feedback for all the jobs applied over time on the shortlist platform, and you applied specifically for the energy initiative. Okay, so I presume you applied to the talent pool and then got access to specific roles. What I would say is please email programs@shortlist.net so we can have a look at your CV directly and provide you with advice on whether there's something about your CV that needs to improve so that we can then help you possibly land more interviews. And this is for technical roles in particular. Okay, yes, please email us directly and then we'll have a talent consultant get in touch with you to understand your challenge a bit more. But thank you for letting us know. And lastly, a transferable skill that's highly valued is teamwork, because not one person in an organization on the continent in the climate change effort is going to do something by themselves. It's important that we can work together and across different backgrounds and cultures. And so being able to work in a team and contribute effectively there too is a transferable skill that you likely all have that you can leverage as we think about how to transition your careers. More on skill building for jobs is the technical skills that we see in demand, such as technical skills in the renewable energy sector. We see a lot of asks for solar technicians. Increasingly, we will see for other renewable energy technology, such as wind farm. I forget what they're called. Wind. What's the thing called? Wind turbine installers. Yes, that's what it's called. There's jobs in energy efficiency, in climate science, in adaptation, and in finance. So in case you're an accountant or you're interested in finance, there's so many courses like the one we recently shared on ACCN that allow you to upskill. And what we're doing is we're trying to find courses that are affordable and accessible to the youth in Africa, because a lot of times we'll also find that the accessibility to these resources is limited because of the affordability or the requirements. And so we're trying to identify such resources that are easily accessible from both financial but also qualification perspective um, to access. I see a comment from Victoria. Jessica is responding, but she'll let you know. What we do is also in the newsletter that we send round to the community on a monthly basis is we include a roundup of the roles that we see that we have available for active recruitment. And just to let you guys know that the roles in the programs are different from the roles on the job board, in the sense that the programs are roles we directly intervene in terms of identifying people to shortlist and working with the employers directly, versus the jobs on the climate job board, which are open sourced but available for you to apply, just that we're not working on them directly as shortlist. So I hope that's helpful information. How can I receive the newsletter? If you're already in the community, you should be receiving it. But if you've never received it, we'll share a link so that you can join and receive the newsletter on a monthly basis. And thank you, Jessica, for responding to Victoria. So I'll move for the purposes of time. And I want to talk about how to prepare to work in climate. And so there's definitely things within your control that you can do to prepare for a career in the sector, one of which you have already done by joining this community, is you can educate yourself. There are so many resources available online that help you learn more about climate change. But the good news is we also make these resources available on ACCN. So when we find good reports or articles, podcasts, online courses, we're sharing these to make it easier for you to find them. Get involved in climate activism. Like I said, you're empowering yourself with knowledge now. Use that knowledge in your networks and your circles, whether it's at a club or a youth club you're in, or at school, or in professional networks you're in. Speak up and give your opinion about what's happening. Volunteer for climate events, rallies, and such within your community, but also network. So as you are on ACCN, this is a great step towards networking in general, but also attend events, industry events, and other climate-focused forums to meet other people who are doing wonderful things in the sector and may also be able to direct you towards opportunities, whether job or volunteering or education, that will help you with your climate journey. And then also develop the skills that are in demand. So if you don't have the technical skills that are needed for the job that you want, consider taking some courses. But if you're already on your professional journey and you want to pivot into the sector, look at the skills that are needed and see how you can bridge those gaps. And we have some suggestions on how to do that, which is coming up. So a question to you again, how are you preparing yourself to transition into a climate career? Please drop a note for us in the chat. Thank you. As you think about how you're preparing yourself to transition into a climate career, I can share for myself, running this course is, I think, one big way, because I'm not particularly a climate expert, but I am very interested in climate in general. And working on the ACCN community at Shortlist has really enabled me to seek out a lot of extra information that I previously didn't think of. I learned a lot about adaptation and mitigation. And as a project manager myself, I see ways in which I can use my skills to help Shortlist, but also other organizations with their various programs in climate. I can see Christine says doing a course in sustainability, absolutely. If you're on ACCN, you should actually see, did we share? We might have not shared it yet, but a post for a course available from terra.do, or it's been shared, which is essentially a more thorough climate course offered by terra.do that Shortlist is subsidizing for the ACCN community members. So please go find the post and register if you'd like to. That's another way of preparing yourself to transition. Donald says he's currently networking with climate experts. That's really commendable, Donald. We could learn something from you as well. So if you have any cool introductions you'd like to make, I'm happy to receive them. Sinaida says she's networking and participating in events and conferences related to climate. She has a degree in environmental science as well. Fantastic. That's great to hear. You're absolutely taking the right steps. Evan says engaging more with content on carbon taxation on UN. Okay, I don't know how UNCC elan.org. Thank you for sharing. We'll also have a look at what that is and see if we can share it further with others, in addition to the other courses that we share frequently. These are great examples. Thank you for sharing them with us. Moving to taking action as a community, as an individual. What can you do practically to transition your career into climate? You can definitely leverage ACCN. You're here today, and that's really commendable. As I've mentioned, the resources that we share, please use them. We share industry reports, research papers, employers, opportunities that we see, and these should help you expand your knowledge and identify opportunities that you're interested in, as well as building your climate sector toolkit. When we talk about engaging in the channels, ask questions that you have on ACCN. We're at hand to help you answer them, whether it's about how to position your career, or if you have questions about any resources we've shared, or questions for anyone else in the community. Please, let's engage in these channels that we have on ACCN. We hope that your next big opportunity could come from a conversation that started on there. Participate in webinars and skill building sessions. As mentioned in the chat, attending these events and sessions are a great way of helping you, first of all, network, but second of all, build your knowledge. And so these webinars help you understand policy, understand metrics around the sector, and get tips on how to build your career in the sector, understand more about what's being done in climate change in Africa. And they also help, they're also designed to help you equip you with the skills that you need. So do participate when you see such webinars and skill building sessions, whether it's on ACCN or anywhere else you may come across them. I find them particularly valuable. As was it Sinaida and Donald mentioned, connecting directly with key players. So talking to experts, networking with them. We as ACCN want to bring them to you on the community so that they can speak to us, have a webinar session where we have information on interviews. They can tell us about their experiences in the sector. How did they grow their own careers? What obstacles did they experience? What opportunities do they see? So talking to people who are directly working in this space is another way you can equip yourself. And this is also another way of opening new doors for your career. And then also creating an action plan. After you've absorbed all this information through ACCN, through other resources, and you've built your network, and as you're building your network, you should definitely create a personalized plan. Identify roles you're interested in the sector, identify what skills you have versus what skills you need, and the people who can help you get there, and use ACCN as a stepping stone to make your plan a reality. Next year, we'll be running some career sessions to help you practically know how to do this. So also, we'll be sharing when that's available. Excuse me. And finally, share your progress. You need to inspire yourself and others. So as a community, we would thrive on shared progress and success. And as you move forward in your career and contribute to climate action, we'd love to hear how you're doing, what your milestones are, what are you achieving, what challenges are you seeing, because your story can also inspire somebody else to take their own leap. And so other ways to take action is advocacy and activism are not spectator sports. I've been encouraging us to learn to speak up within our own spaces. And so, when I say speak up, when you're learning and you're accessing all these resources, use the facts and the data that you've gained to inform your conversations in your networks. And whether it's at home or at work or on social media, you have a chance to say something that can make a difference and advocate for change. Also take some time to be involved locally and take part in local climate initiatives that you might come across in your areas. Hands-on involvement will amplify your impact and give you a chance to apply what you've learned, but also give you a chance to collect experiences that will be valuable in your career. So whether you see tree planting initiatives or local climate policy advocacy, do try and participate. There's a lot to do there as people on the planet. Definitely use your leverage in your career. The more you grow, the more influence you'll have, and I'd encourage you to use it. I myself am telling you, as much as Kenya is leading in some climate initiatives, we're also not doing so great with some of our policies. And whenever I have a chance to say that, I will. And so use your spaces, leverage where you are to advocate for sustainable practices in your workplace, give suggestions to your HR on things that can be done in the organization, including hiring practices, and also guide your company where you know you have knowledge and facts towards cleaner practices. We talk about collaboration with other ACCN members. You're part of a network of very driven individuals. And so use the platform to find others with similar goals to yourself, and start a thing. Whether you want to write an article and you want to post it on ACCN, please let us know. Whether you want to start a community event or have some kind of information campaign, collaborating as a network will definitely amplify your impact. Hold your leaders accountable. I didn't think, oh, it's there. As we continue to learn about policies and initiatives locally and internationally across Africa and the world, I'd say use your networks and social platforms to hold decision makers accountable. Share petitions when you see them that are about climate. Engage with lawmakers online. Twitter or X now is a great place to have very human conversations with people who are decision makers. And join public forums when you have access to them to ask the tough questions where you can. Lastly, never stop learning. So the climate crisis is evolving. That's why we're here today. And your understanding of this crisis should also evolve. So continue to engage with us on ACCN, the resources we share, and other places, but also participate in new courses when you see them and keep up with updates in the industry. This slide is a repeat. So we can go on to the case studies unless we have questions there. I can see Victoria saying she's currently networking with a climate expert and gained a lot of insights from COP28 this year. Thank you for sharing, Victoria. We also learned a lot from our online participation. We didn't attend it ourselves, but we learned a lot. So thanks for letting us know. I'll move into some case studies. So I did mention at the beginning of this presentation that there were a few initiatives that we found quite inspiring and would like to share them with you. So looking at the Great Green Wall Initiative, which combats desertification in the Sahel region. The initiative was formed to essentially respond to the problem of desertification, which results in land degradation and decreased agricultural productivity, which leads to increased vulnerability to climate change. But it also leads to other economic problems, as we can see, and we've mentioned before, like migration and dwindling resources. And so this Great Green Wall Initiative aims to grow back a lot of forests and productive landscapes across the Sahel region. And it started in 2007. Sorry, some of my slides disappeared a bit. 1 second. It started in 2007 and is a long-term project with a goal for 2030. And is being implemented by over 20 African countries, supported by international players. And so the goal was to restore 100 million hectares by 2030. But millions already have been restored and millions of trees have been planted. But I can say that the impact right now is 18 million hectares have been restored out of the 100 million, with 6 years to go. And 350,000 green jobs out of 10 million have been created. So clearly, as much as it's a great initiative, there's still a long way to go in terms of actually meeting these objectives, because the impact is significant. Beyond the environmental benefits, there's been a lot of jobs that have been created, food security and stability within those communities. And it's estimated that by the end of this decade, the project will have created 10 million jobs in rural areas. So I feel a lot of investment still to go to get us further along our current progress with the amount of time that's left with this initiative. And hopefully it will be extended, because it already has a lot of impact and there needs to be some sustainability around how it's managed to continue to achieve its purpose. Moving to the next case study that's really cool is the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project in Kenya. And this is harnessing wind energy. And this project has been really impactful in the community in which it's located. So the problem it's trying to address is Kenya used to have a very heavy reliance on non-renewable energy. Now, I think about 80% of our energy is actually coming from renewable energy sources, of which wind is one of them. And the project itself started in 2014 and was fully operational by 2018. The economic impact of this project was the farm contributes 310 megawatts to the national grid, which has reduced our dependency on other power sources and cut production costs. The electricity generated from the project has reduced our reliance on fuel imports and has saved Kenya more than 280 million euros between 2018 and now, or 2021. The social impact, more interestingly, is that it employed 2,500 people from the community around the location where it's operating, and now is the largest private employer in Marsabit, which is the area it's in. Sustainably, it's employing 329 people, 85 of whom come directly from the community of the farm, or the area where the farm is. And from an environmental impact, it's providing clean energy to over 1 million people. Another case study we can look at, which is Pan-African, is the Africa Development Bank's Light Up and Power Africa strategy, which is an electrification and renewable energy project. And this strategy has already given millions of people access to electricity across Africa. It aimed to, the problem it was aiming to solve was that 600 million Africans did not have access to electricity, and this impeded development and other socio-economic factors. And so looking at ways to create more reliable and sustainable energy was what it was trying to address. And so right now, I know that you hear a lot about electrification, especially in rural areas across the continent. This is, I think, it's supposed to be ending in 2025. So not a lot of time left on that project, but it focuses on 4 key areas, which is to increase the number of people with access to electricity, support development and deployment of new renewable energy resources, improve energy efficiency in all sectors, and mobilizing private investment in the energy sector. And the positive impact that this project has had is, millions of people obviously gaining access to electricity and thousands of jobs being created, but also cool things like Morocco having the largest concentrated solar power plant in the world, and other very innovative projects across the continent. And so, as mentioned, this is expected to achieve universal electricity access in Africa by 2025. Again, pragmatically, I don't believe that that will happen by then, but there's probably a plan to extend the timeline so that they can achieve their goals. And while we're not sure how many jobs have been created through this project, tens of thousands definitely have been created across the continent. And they vary in terms of function, from infrastructure development to operations. That was the last case study I had. I'd like to give us some room for questions, any comments you might have, as I encourage you to continue engaging with us on ACCN, and look out for our updates on opportunities we come across and resources, but opening the floor for any questions you may have or comments. I don't hear any questions yet, but I'd like to let you know that we recorded this session, and so we'll share it with you in case you need to go over any of the points again. But feel free to also share the presentation with your friends and encourage them to join ACCN. We host these every month, and next year we'll also be hosting career sessions that should help you further develop your action plans and hopefully transition you quicker into your next roles. I see a question in terms of any school in Kenya with climate savvy courses you know about. Yes, so there's Strathmore. They do have, what's the name of the department? Jessica might have more intimate knowledge. We can share.
So Strathmore have the Strathmore Energy Research Center that is particularly interested in providing resources, training for solar PV certifications, as well as a recent one that was launched last month, certificates in African carbon markets. So if you're looking to delve deeper into carbon markets and to get certified, they did a certification course back in November.
Thank you for sharing. What we'll do is we'll try and compile a list of courses that we are aware of, and we'll share on ACCN so that you can have a look and decide if there's any there that you'd be able to participate in. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you for the feedback, Sinaida. I also really appreciate your engagement. And thank you everyone who's joined. We don't take it for granted. I hope that you found this session to be helpful. And if you have any thoughts or feedback that you'd like to share with us, you can also just reach out separately and let us know so that we can continue to improve. This is our second one. Thank you so much. I will end the session here. I hope you all have a fantastic holiday season.